Karen Vox asked me to welcome you, and then about a month later, she said, oh, you have 15 minutes to talk. So I started to panic and pulled out a presentation that I had done earlier in the fall and shortened it extensively. So hopefully I will just give you a little smattering of our perspective on what the roles of engineers in the next century, or this century now, sorry, showing my age. So I think a lot in my role as dean. I do a lot of thinking about science and engineering education. I'm a member of the National Academy of Engineering, and I serve on a number of panels related to education. The most recent one is I'm on a NRC committee right now that's looking at the value of integrated STEM in K through 12. So it's an interesting group of educators that are part of that committee. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with engineering, but after these few days, hopefully you'll know more. But engineers are very proud of the many achievements that have led to the betterment of our way of life. And this is just a list of, in the last century, discoveries, inventions, developments that are attributed to engineering. Engineers, I should say, and I'm not going to read the list, obviously. But the other thing is there's a very strong link between engineering and economic development, and you see this all over in the papers. Obama is a great supporter, as you know, of science and engineering education. And these are just statistics that say that 85% of measured growth in U.S. income per capita has been due to technological change. And what's interesting to me is that 21% of the S&P 500 companies are headed by executives with engineering undergraduate degrees. And that's the most common degree of S&P 500 executives. And yet, you don't hear about engineers being the people that are the leaders. So at Tufts here, we're trying to groom engineering leaders. And we want people that are going to change the world and make it a better place. And one of our alums we're very proud of is Ellen Kuhlman, who is the CEO of DuPont, and she's an ME alum here. And she's on our board of trustees, and one of her children has graduated this year from Tufts, so we're very proud of that. But we're not doing so well, as you all know, in science and engineering education. We've lost international leadership. We're now 27th among developed nations in proportion of college students receiving undergraduate degrees in science or engineering, which, and what I was surprised at, the US graduates in visual arts and performing arts, there are more majors in those areas than there are in engineering now in the US. And not to say I'm a violinist, and not to say there's anything wrong with that, but in terms of, the availability of jobs and availability of ability to change the world, one could argue that engineers may have a better shot at it. And we're now 48th in quality of mathematics and science education, which is very sad. And I guess you heard last night, women are still underrepresented in engineering. In fact, we had a higher percentage of women in engineering back in the early 2000s than we do today. We actually lost ground. And there's been a little uptick recently, but I don't know if it's statistically significant. So it's been very flat. When I started out, I'm a dinosaur. I started out in engineering back in I graduated in '76 with my BS. And at that time I was the only woman in my class. So times have changed. We're now at 20%, but we're nowhere near parity there. And then with underrepresented minorities, we're doing even worse. The blue bars here show the representation in the population of 18 to 23-year-olds, and the top bar that are colored show the representation in science and engineering. And you can see that the stereotype about Asian Pacific Islanders is true. There's a disproportionate amount of Asian students that go into science and engineering. But in terms of Latinos and blacks, we see much underrepresentation. And we're not even keeping the students that we bring in, or the students that are interested. And we're losing close to half of the students from engineering that are interested when they come into college. So that's a national number, and you probably heard about that statistic too in the news recently. Well, I'm happy to say that in some ways, we're doing better at Tufts, not in all ways. One is that over the last 6 years, we've seen a 54% increase in applications. I think nationally, you're seeing a rise now in engineering applications and science because people, with the economic downturn, people are recognizing that it's a good way to get a job. Particularly computer science is on the rise again. And computer science is part of the School of Engineering at Tufts. And our female enrollment has always been statistically higher than the national average. We're at 30% female, and we've been pretty flat. But we're making a concerted effort, and this year, actually, it's 38%. I made a mistake. Our class of 2016, the entering class in the fall, is now up to 38%. So I was shooting for 40. We didn't make that, but we're getting closer. And we've developed some bridge programs to try to better prepare our students. The students that we do lose are often underrepresented minorities or first-generation college goers that don't have the preparation that they need to compete. And we're very proud that we have a zero net attrition in our School of Engineering, which means we graduate as many students as we take in, and as many students move from arts and sciences in engineering as move out of engineering into arts and sciences at Tufts. So I don't think any other school can claim that. And I think it's because we allow students to pursue their passions, and we have a really good advising system, and they don't run around with an E on their forehead. And they can double major in other things. But we're still doing less well in the minority category, and we've doubled our entering class to 8.5% of Latino and African American, but still woefully small. And so we have a long ways to go there. So what can be done? I could spend a whole lecture on this, but as I said, I'm in the National Academy, and they produced a report which is called Changing the Conversation. Improving public understanding of engineering. If you haven't seen this report, you can check it out on the web. But basically, they worked with a marketing firm to say, how do we express the excitement of doing engineering and make it sound less boring, less white male? There's some perception that it's not as prestigious as a scientist, and how do we dispel those things? And then there's a lot of little quotes that. Such as, because dreams need doing, I have a bumper sticker on my car that I drive around with. I like that one. So it's trying to capture people's imagination. The other thing is they brought a group of people together, experts, deep thinkers, visionaries, to try to say, what are the exciting new challenges for this 21st century? And they came up with 14 grand challenges, and you may have heard of this. There is a number of symposium across the country that have built around these grand challenges. And I'm not going to go through these, but there's some interesting problems. Provide access to clean water, engineer the tools of scientific discovery, reverse engineer the brain. Some of these are way out there. Some of these are right front and center of the newspapers every day. But there's been a lot of excitement about these ideas and trying to develop the skills to deal with them. And so from our perspective, what I would like to do is educate the next generation of engineers such they can be the technological leaders. I'm not looking for folks that just read blueprints or sit in front of the computer all day, but folks who are out there working in interdisciplinary teams to try to solve the important societal problems. And I think all of these problems are inherently interdisciplinary, and I think we've been too siloed in our education, and that's nothing new. So it requires a team approach to solving problems. We can't learn everything. We can't know everything. We have to work with others. So we've been trying to develop a set of attributes that we think our students should have and try to work more towards a curriculum that provides that for them. And so number one is a strong technical background. You can't do interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary unless you have a discipline. So you need to be solid. But you have to have an understanding of engineering is in its societal context, and you have to be able to work effectively across cultural and interdisciplinary teams. It's a tall order, and there's a lot of discussion. Can we really give this to our students? The other thing is we want to have the students to have substantial experience in problem solving, hands-on learning, the practice of engineering, which has somewhat been lost if we stick with large lecture classes. And something that's also not emphasized, but I think it's really important, is you can't give people values necessarily, but you can make them think deeply and help them develop the professional and personal values that support ethical practice and professional success. And we've been doing a lot of thinking about that too. And we're revamping the freshman first-year courses. I'm told I can't use the word freshman anymore. It should, my female students are objecting to that, so we're saying first-year courses. We're revamping those to try to address some of these and get people plugged into what it means to be an engineer and what the possibilities are. So we have 3 themes. We have human technology interface, engineering the human technology interface, engineering for human health, and engineering for sustainability. So as a school, we're trying to look outward, and we're trying to look at how we can make connections. And we are recruiting faculty across all our departments in these areas. And I think students are really excited about these ideas. So I just have a couple examples of stuff that our faculty and students are doing I thought might be of interest to you. This is Fio Amanetto. He's a professor in biomedical engineering. Fio is collaborating with another professor, David Kaplan, who is developing silk platforms for tissue engineering originally, and Fio discovered all these optical properties of silk. He found you could nano-pattern silk, and now they're starting to work with silk electronics as just one example where they can embed silk in the human body. It's perfectly compatible with humans. It's FDA approved, and they're starting to work right now with mouse brains, and they can embed sensors in the brain, and then the silk dissolves away. They can time its dissolution, and it leaves the electrodes in place. And anyway, it's very interesting stuff. There's all kinds of applications. You can just look up, let's see, what's the keyword there? Silk electronics. I think you'll find a lot of stuff on the web. Fio won a Guggenheim a year ago. He's the only engineer in the US to win a Guggenheim that year. So 2010. We have students and faculty working. One of our faculty took a sabbatical at the medical school and is working with medical doctors to start to look at how we can help them better use their data to, right now she's told me about another application where she's actually going through all the data on MS patients and seeing whether they can do a better job of diagnosis by understanding the patterns between the symptoms and the lab test and the actual outcomes. And so she's doing that kind of work, data mining, but she's also looking at data security, and also she's doing a project with our faculty to help us develop ways we can better make connections with potential collaborators. So that's Carla Broadley, who's the chair of computer science. There's Alex Stankovich, who he's interested in smart grids. So he came to Tufts because we have a Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And he knows that any solution to our energy problems is going to involve policy. So we can't develop new technologies in a vacuum. And he came to Tufts because he can work with the policymakers and try to figure out how we can combine different technologies in a reliable grid to support the new electrical energy. And then we have Shafiq Islam, who's a professor in civil and environmental engineering, who's looking at the connection between water and cholera outbreaks. And he's made the news in a number of places. He also has a program in water and diplomacy, or water diplomacy. So we're educating a group of PhDs in the connection between conflict and diplomacy and water, which is a very interesting space. And it's joint with the Fletcher School as well as the School of Arts and Sciences. We have folks working. This is my own research. I'm an environmental engineer, and working in looking at nanoparticle transport and fate in the environment. We're producing billions of tons now of nanoparticles, and we don't know a lot about what happens to them. And some of them could potentially get into cells and disrupt function. We're learning lots of things about that now. And so we're looking at that. And that's Kurt Pinnell, my collaborator, who's chair of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. And we have a new faculty member, Remco Chang, who's working with the humanities folks. And he's trying to see how we can better visualize conflicts. This is a work he's doing with political science folks, but he's looking at how visualization can help us better understand all sorts of human endeavors and problems. And I know you're going to see the Viz wall this afternoon, and that's one of the labs that we use. We have an interdisciplinary lab right now set up a little away from campus. It's about a 15-minute walk, but we've developed a new lab for interdisciplinary computation. So we're really excited about that, and Remco has his lab down there. And there's Elena Naumova, who is looking at, she's a biostatistician. We have an environmental health group in our engineering, civil engineering department, and she's looking at the connection between human health and environmental contaminants and environmental factors, and she looks holistically and uses a lot of visualization. I know you're going to be talking about that and have been. And got a guy who has a PhD in philosophy and in computer science, and he's looking at developing robots the languages for robots that can communicate with people. And that's Cindy, his biggest robot, and there's a neat video that I should get the link to. It's where Cindy, you can give her all these commands, and she goes and gets things and does things for you, and it's really cool. That's Matthias Scheutz. And so we've developed a joint program in computer science and cognitive science, a PhD program, which is already attracting, it's only in its first year, and it's already attracting we have about 10 students entering this year. So I'm really excited about that. And lastly, we're working on alternative energy stuff, and this is a professor who's actually looking at the use of waste heat to generate electricity. And if this can be made to work commercially, this would be amazing. I don't know if that it's there yet, but it's a great idea. So those are a few things that are going on at Tufts, and I think I almost made my time. But anyway, I hope you enjoy your day, and I look forward to hearing all about it. So thanks very much.